It's the honest truth. Even your father-in-law must have heard about your blunders, right? It's downright unbearable. Sharing a meal with a poor woman who grew up in a single mother household like you? It's preposterous. You come from a different world than us. Please, just leave and wait outside. Understood. I'll leave. I politely said goodbye to the Johnson family and tried to leave. My name is Mary Johnson. I'm a 24-year-old working at Johnson Enterprises. As a secretary to the CEO, I've been employed here for about 2 years. I was actually invited to join the company by the CEO, Ronald Johnson, while I was still in college. We were in the same business class and ended up becoming good friends because our seats were side by side. Ronald is 30 years old, and we met when he was 24. He had already graduated from a 4-year college, but he was attending college again to deepen his knowledge as a business owner, it seems. He is quite the scholar. His father is the chairman of the Johnson Group. During his university years, Ronald took over his father's will and served as the president of Johnson Group Trading. He became an elite at a young age by becoming a president. My family, on the other hand, was extremely poor. My father was a gambling addict and a hopeless casino fanatic. The debts he incurred led to my parents' divorce when I was in elementary school. My mother raised me single-handedly. I want to somehow help my mother who has been struggling. With that feeling, I kept working hard at my studies. And then, Ronald, who learned about my situation, invited me to join his company, Johnson Trading. 2 years have passed since I joined the company and started working as Ronald's secretary. I have acquired secretarial and business document skills certification and am working hard for Ronald. By the way, Ronald Johnson, the president, is also my husband. Originally, I was interested in him during my university years and started dating after joining Johnson Trading. After a year of dating, I got married to Ronald. Ronald is a kind husband who, despite being a president, never acts arrogant and always takes care of me. I feel extreme happiness being able to be with him both at work and at home. I truly believe it was great that I met Ronald. Then came a certain day. A transfer notice was announced at Johnson Trading, and I couldn't hide my surprise at the name. The appointment of a vice president, and that name was Julia Johnson. I inadvertently frowned at the sight of the new vice president's name. I couldn't believe that the person I was not comfortable with was becoming vice president. This Julia Johnson is the wife of Ronald's brother, Billy Johnson. The reason she was promoted to vice president is because she has a proven track record of reviving companies in the Johnson Group. The performance of Johnson Trading has been declining year by year. Originally dealing mainly in food and clothing, the recent epidemic has resulted in a decline in sales. Ronald was in a frenzy, trying to recover the performance. but to no avail. Hence, the competent Julia Johnson was appointed as vice president. In other words, she is my sister-in-law. Why am I uncomfortable with this person? The reason goes back 1 year. I first met Julia at the wedding reception when Ronald and I got married. She was a very beautiful and cute woman, but when I greeted her, she just said, I got a really bad impression. Did I do something? When I tried to start a conversation with Julia, where are you from? Where am I from? I'm from Cincinnati. The moment she clicked her tongue. Do you not understand what I mean? I'm asking about your social status, not where you're from. Surely, you're not just a commoner, are you? I couldn't make sense of my conversation with her, and all I could say was, I am an ordinary citizen. Then she just disappeared without a word. I haven't seen Julia since then. The much anticipated day of the internal personnel change, X Day, arrived. Julia was appointed as vice president, and Ronald and I went to the station to pick her up. I was nervous about seeing her again after a long time. I didn't know what to say, so all I could say was, Julia, nice to meet you. She just said, oh, it's been a while. Got into the limousine arranged by Ronald and headed straight to Johnson Trading. When Ronald and I entered the president's office, I heard words from him that made me doubt my ears. He wanted me to be Julia's secretary. When I asked why me, he said it was because Julia had requested it. Apparently, Ronald couldn't refuse because she was his brother's wife. I reluctantly accepted when he pleaded with me. The job is the same as the president's secretary, managing the schedule, assisting with tasks, and answering the vice president's phone calls. However, since the person was my brother-in-law's wife and an unknown entity, I found it hard to do. Still, I had to do it. In the afternoon, I entered the vice president's office where Julia was. I greeted her and tried to start a conversation in the hope of getting along with her a little bit. I'm so glad that you're the vice president, Julia. I look forward to working with you. I greeted with a smile, but she said, I don't care about that. Just tell me tomorrow's schedule. I was initially angry, but I held it in, apologized with, I'm sorry, and explained it to her with my notebook. What's with this arrogant attitude? But she is a member of the Johnson family. I didn't want to cause a big trouble, and didn't want to cause trouble to Ronald, so I decided to do my job while holding back. That day, Ronald came home to the apartment when I got home. When I went to greet him at the entrance, he said, What's wrong? You look pale. I just responded with, I'm fine. I couldn't tell him after all. One day, I made a grave mistake. I accidentally swapped Ronald and Julia's schedules and only realized this when I received a phone call from Julia. She stated that she had not scheduled the meeting that I had told her about. Looking at the schedule, I saw that I had relayed the details of the meeting meant for Ronald to Julia instead. I realized my mistake, but it was too late by then. I was rebuked by Julia saying, I apologized to the client, but they didn't forgive me, and we lost a hard-won deal worth $200,000 because of you. She also lamented about the fact that she had to put up with unwanted advances from the lecherous president of the company we were dealing with to secure the deal, all of which ended up being for naught due to my error. Upon hearing that Julia returned to the office, I immediately went to the president's office. I walked in, and first thing, I apologized deeply. But Julia shouted back, "Sorry isn't enough," her face as red as a demon's. I was at a loss for words when Ronald stepped in. "This time it's true that Mary is at fault, but there's nothing we can do about it now. Be careful next time." Ronald tried to mediate the situation, but Julia snidely remarked, "She'll just make the same mistake again. This is why uneducated commoners are useless." Upon hearing this comment, I recognized my fault, but wondered what she meant by not having a decent education. It felt like my personality and life were being denied, which fueled my irritation. But the mistake was mine. Unable to retort, I stayed silent. Then Ronald intervened. "That might be an overstatement." However, Julia turned away with a dismissive, After getting permission from Ronald to leave, I exited the president's office. I went to the company cafe to reflect, pondering why I made the mistake. Just then, Julia walked in. I rushed to her, saying, "Julia, I'm sincerely sorry for what happened." I apologized without caring who was around. "I'm forgiving you this time because the president asked me to. But don't think there will be a next time. I can fire a commoner like you anytime." This was the last straw. I understand and accept my mistake. But what does being a commoner have to do with anything? Excuse me, is being a commoner relevant here? What? Who are you to argue? If you had a proper education, you wouldn't have made such a mistake. Well, I think my mistake and my home environment are unrelated. Is there something against commoners? I inadvertently confronted Julia. She sighed as if exasperated and said, "Never mind." Then she walked away. A week later, Ronald, Julia, and I were set to attend the head office's executive meeting. We had a pre-meeting lunch as the meeting was scheduled in the afternoon. After thoroughly checking the topics and materials, I felt well prepared this time. As our meeting neared conclusion and Ronald left for the restroom, I also went to the restroom at that time. I felt nervous about attending the meeting with Julia, fearing more criticisms. I felt a salty taste as I sipped the water in my glass, but dismissed it as my imagination and finished the drink to quench my thirst. We joined the executive meeting at 3 p.m. The meeting progressed smoothly, but suddenly, I felt an urge to use the restroom. The feeling was so strong that I could hear my stomach rumbling. There was no way I could hold it in. Yet, I didn't have the courage to interrupt this solemn meeting by declaring, "Excuse me, restroom," and rushing out. Regardless of my reluctance, the urge to go kept tormenting me. "Ronald, everyone, I'm sorry." Before facing the deluge, the disaster, the guerrilla rainstorm, I'm sorry. I rushed out of the meeting room and into the restroom, where I stayed for nearly 30 minutes. Everything was over, and I opened the door and stepped outside. I was feeling incredibly unwell from dehydration and exhaustion. It seemed that the meeting was over too, and Ronald and Julia were sitting in the company cafe. Ronald was looking at me with concern, but Julia had a smirk on her face. That's when a suspicion crossed my mind. The water I had drunk earlier had a strong, salty taste. When I returned from the toilet and sat down, clutching my stomach, Ronald asked me if I was okay. But Julia just said, "Did you eat something weird and get food poisoning?" in a sarcastic tone. Could it be that she mixed a laxative in while I was gone? But why? Would she do something like that? Out of anger for the lost deal? I don't know, but I did have diarrhea after drinking that water. I found myself plunged in doubt and suspicion. Ronald told me, "Go home and rest today." So I decided to go home. The diarrhea was better, but my stomach hurt. I laid my head on the cafe table until I calmed down. After a while, the pain subsided and I decided to head home. But before that, I had to inform the vice president of tomorrow's schedule. I headed to the vice president's office and knocked on the door. When I did, I heard Julia's voice saying, "Come in." When I entered the room, she said, "Oh, it's you." Of course, she didn't bother asking about my health. "What do you want? Make it quick, I'm busy." "Julia, you put something in the water, didn't you?" At my question, Julia smirked and said, "What are you talking about?" Don't play dumb. At lunchtime, when Ronald and I left our seats, didn't you mix something in my glass? Oh my, what a sudden accusation! It's completely unreasonable to blame others. Get out of here, you fool! Furthermore, I saw a box of laxatives on her desk. When Julia noticed my gaze, she said, "Well, I might as well tell you the truth. Yes, I mixed a drug into your glass." Why would you do such a thing? What did I ever do to you? Why have you been like this since we met? It's simple. Because you're a commoner, that's all. You're unnecessary to the Johnson family. Her flippant reason for considering me a commoner left me not just angry, but dumbfounded. And tears welled up in my eyes. "Unfortunately, I'll have to fire you. No matter how much you tell the president about me, you have no evidence, so it's impossible. Plus, if you consult anyone, you'll be making an enemy of the Johnson family. A rift will form between my husband Billy and Ronald, and the brotherly relationship will become the worst because of you. If you're okay with that, feel free to consult." She was right. If I told Ronald, the Johnson family would be in turmoil. I had no choice but to endure in silence. Tears of frustration wouldn't stop. and I navigated through the blurry vision to head home. Ronald worried about my sobbing figure. I wanted to talk, but if I did, things would get serious. Ronald asked, "What happened? Is it about Julia?" He hit the nail on the head. After much hesitation, I said, "Actually, Julia..." I ended up talking about everything, the past events and the incidents at today's meeting. Once I started speaking, I couldn't stop, and I ended up speaking my mind. And then, I couldn't stay in the Johnson family anymore. But it was because of me that a major deal fell through. I was just a drag. "Ronald, I'm sorry. Let's get divorced. If I'm gone, you can stay good with Billy, with Julia. I'm an unnecessary person. Don't despair. I'm no good without Mary. I love Mary. I want you by my side every moment. That's why I made you my secretary. So please, don't leave me. Don't talk about such sad things like breaking up." One day, at the end of the year, Ronald asked me to come to a dinner party where the entire Johnson family would gather. Of course, Julia would be there. I decided to go to the dinner party. After all, it was an important event. And then I made up my mind and left the house. The staff greeted me and showed me the way. My in-laws, Billy, and Julia were already at the table. I greeted everyone. Of course, Julia acted sullenly with a It was an expected attitude. When Ronald and I sat down, Julia first said, "I feel sick." "I really feel sick. Having dinner with this poor trash? It pollutes the atmosphere. It will spoil caviar we are going to have." At this statement, my father-in-law said, "What are you talking about?" in anger. "It's the truth. You must have heard about her gaffe too, right? It's so annoying. It's not a joke to have dinner with a commoner from a single mother household. You're from a different world. Just go out. It's better if you wait outside." Understood, then. I said bye to everyone in the Johnson family and was about to leave. I heard my father-in-law suddenly yell, "Then you should go home." "What? What do you mean, father-in-law?" "No ifs or buts. You're the unnecessary one in the Johnson family." "What are you talking about, father-in-law? I am the vice president of Johnson Corporation and Billy's wife." She seemed to want to argue, but my father-in-law shook his head and said, "It seems Billy wants to divorce you." At that word, Julia glared at Billy. "Billy, is that true?" "Yes. I'm tired of your high-handed attitude that looks down on people, and you don't do any housework. You're good at your job, and there are parts I respect, but otherwise, you're done as a human being. You're the one who's in the way." What? Furthermore, it seems like my father-in-law had heard from Ronald about what Julia had done to me so far. The fact that Billy didn't like her, and about me. My father-in-law seemed to have planned to cut ties with Julia at this opportunity. That's what the dinner was for. "Don't say such ridiculous things. After all, father-in-law, Do you have any proof? The proof that I made Mary sick." At this time, I thought it was time for revenge. Everyone in the Johnson family is on my side. There's nothing to fear. I remembered on the spur of the moment and pulled out the pen I always stick in my chest. Then, Julia made a puzzled face and then laughed out loud. "What are you thinking, showing such a thing?" Her complacency will end now. Without any hesitation, I pressed the switch on the pen. "Don't play dumb. Didn't you mix something into my glass when Ronald and I left our seats during lunch?" When my voice played, Julia's face turned pale. "Yes, this pen is not just a pen. It's a pen-type recorder. It's always recording to not forget the content of conversations at negotiations and meetings. Thinking that there might be something, I kept Julia's voice as evidence. And now was the perfect time to play it." Julia covered her face with both hands and was trembling. "It's not over yet, Julia. You didn't really marry Billy out of love. You married him to expand the Lee Group's power, didn't you?" What are you talking about?" Then Ronald took out his smartphone and started playing a certain voice recording. "That poor woman is unnecessary to the Lee Group. Instead, I will incorporate the Johnson Group into the Lee Group eventually." Suddenly, Julia covered her face and screamed, "Stop! I feel so..." Was this her soliloquy? "In doing so, my status will rise even higher. How secure!" After that, a long conversation that seemed like Julia's monologue continued. "Once I become the next president of Johnson Corporation, I can frequent high-end male strip clubs even more than now." And the recording also contained her calling out names of her favorite strippers, saying, "I love you," and "I adore you." Hearing this, Billy showed his anger. "You're obsessed with strippers." Why did she feel embarrassed after the voice recording was played? The Lee Group that Julia mentioned is a rival of the Johnson Group. She originally was the daughter of the Lee Group. However, it was said that she had a love marriage with Billy. But that seemed to be different. She might have been forced into a political marriage as a spy for the Lee Group. "You will divorce Billy and be dismissed as the vice president. Furthermore, we will completely withdraw from the Lee Group. We have been getting along through mutual encouragement, but this is a total break." Julia's face turned pale. Furthermore, the mother-in-law, who had been listening to the whole thing, opened her mouth. "Julia, you called Mary a poor person and a commoner, but what I can't forgive the most is that you denied that she was raised in a single-parent family. I, too, was poor and raised in a single-parent family when I was young. You don't know the human heart. You're the one who's not needed." It was the first time I had seen the mother-in-law so angry. I was surprised, as she always gave me a gentle and smiling impression. Everyone's gaze gathered on Julia. She pounded the table with both hands and stood up vigorously. "Remember this! The Lee Group will never forgive you!" She spat out this parting shot and left the restaurant. Honestly, my heart felt very relieved. Everyone protected me. I no longer needed to leave the Johnson family. As I felt relieved, tears began to flow. Seeing this, Ronald and my parents-in-law and Billy all comforted me. 2 weeks after the dinner party, a call came from the chairman of the Lee Group. I remembered Julia's words. The Lee Group will never forgive you. However, the contents of the call were unexpected. I sincerely apologize for the tremendous inconvenience my daughter, Julia, has caused you. The chairman himself had made an apology call. Apparently, he had heard the detailed story from the chairman of the Johnson Group, my father-in-law, and when he asked Julia, she readily admitted to it. The Lee Group does not think about crushing the Johnson Group at all. This trouble is my responsibility as a parent. I am truly sorry. It turned out that everything had started from Julia's delusion. Moreover, the reason why Julia mixed that thing from me seemed to be a grudge against my previous rebuttal. Does being a commoner matter? It seemed that she couldn't stand being told various things by me, a commoner, even though she was in the upper class. She is indeed a woman with high pride. Some time passed and I received another invitation to a high-end restaurant for my in-laws. I went to the restaurant with Ronald. The place was the same restaurant as before. There, my in-laws were already present, and the 4 of us gathered around the table. My father-in-law tried to order. Then, 2 staff members came over, and I was surprised to see one of them. The staff member was none other than Julia. Why are you guys here? Why are you working here? I have no choice. My father told me to gain experience in customer service and learn about society. Really, even though I, a lady, have to do this. She turned red in the face with anger, and the stern-looking male staff behind her said, "Hey, don't keep the customers waiting. Take their orders." Yes, I'm sorry." She was almost in tears as she took the order. Honestly, it was very funny. The dish was delivered, and while we were enjoying its taste, we heard the male staff yelling again. When I looked in the direction of the voice, Julia was crying and apologized to the male staff. It seemed that she was being scolded for making mistakes in orders and behaving rudely to customers. We ate the delicious food while laughing at the sight of her, who had changed so much.
I'm Sally, a 50-year-old housewife. Both of my children are working adults. They've left home and are living on their own. Now that they're independent, I've started working from home in addition to my housewife duties. My husband has been very supportive of me working from home. At first, I was only able to make around $200 a month, but gradually my income increased to $600, then $800. I'm grateful to the clients who give me work. My sister-in-law's family also lives in the same neighborhood. She's my husband's twin sister, so she's the same age as him. My husband and I are the same age as well, so inevitably, I'm also the same age as my sister-in-law. We became somewhat close from the beginning, but I've always disliked my sister-in-law, and even talking to her was bothersome. My husband also consistently expressed his dislike for his sister. I suppose she's always been arrogant. She's very conceited, loves to look down on people, the type of woman who loves to show off, and it's quite annoying. At her place, she has a bedridden son. For me, he's my nephew. Tommy is 24. He has suffered from a serious illness since he was little, and he can hardly move his body. Therefore, he has always lived in bed. One day, my sister-in-law texted me. It was a snide and condescending text. "I'm going to be in Hawaii starting today, I booked a luxury hotel and I'll be enjoying a whole week there. Well, I guess you can't go, right? Because my poor little brother doesn't make much money. Aren't you guys such a poor middle-aged couple? You're probably on the verge of divorce. Huh? I'm going to be in a swimsuit attracting everyone's attention on the beach. You, with your matronly figure, can't even wear a swimsuit, right? Your belly must be saggy after having 2 kids. But I only have Tommy, so I'm still slim and firm. Nobody would guess I'm 50. Not like you, a fat old woman. How rude could she be? It's true that I have 2 children. They were born close together, so my body didn't snap back right away. Even now, I can't say I have a toned, beautiful belly. I have a matronly figure, but so does my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law seems to have a lot of confidence in herself, but to me she's the same level. If she was a very beautiful and well-shaped person, I might be able to tolerate her comments. But why do I have to hear this from my sister-in-law? Moreover, I wondered what she was going to do with Tommy. So what's going to happen with Tommy? Are you leaving him somewhere or having someone come in every day? Even staying overnight? Huh? There's no way I'm doing that. It's a hassle. He'll be fine just sleeping at home, won't he? Anyway, I left some drinks and things by his bed. That's horrible. How can you do such a thing? What? I don't need to be told by someone like you who hasn't had any hardship. My life is messed up because of him. I shouldn't have had a son like that. Well then, I'll take care of him. I'll go get Tommy now. Do whatever you want. I'll be happy if he's gone. Just wait. I'll be there shortly. And so I headed towards my sister-in-law's house. It's a mere 5-minute drive, so it's very close. Tommy is bedridden and uses a special wheelchair to get around. That's why I headed there in a station wagon, which can accommodate a wheelchair. You really came for this kind of guy? Yes, I did, because I feel sorry for Tommy. He's just a burden, just lazing around doing nothing at his age. Well, you're also a full-time housewife living around, so you're perfect for each other. I'm doing remote work, you know. I'm not a housewife living around, and not all housewives are loafers, right? Pff, remote work, huh? That's not a real job. Both my husband and I are full-time employees. You're basically just a housewife. It'd serve you right to spend the rest of your life taking care of Tommy. Oh, is that so? Let's go, Tommy. Okay. Tommy seemed to be rather downcast. It can't be helped, as he's being treated like this by his biological mother. I understand that taking care of a sick child is very difficult, but it's too cruel to say such things right in front of him. At the very least, if she has to vent, I wish she would do it somewhere out of the child's sight. It doesn't matter whether the child is an adult, because anyone in the same situation will definitely get hurt. After some time, I managed to bring Tommy to our house. Then my husband came home. Huh? Tommy? Why are you here? Uncle David, I'm sorry. The truth is, your sister was going to leave Tommy behind because she's going on vacation, so I said I'd bring him home. I'm sorry for doing this without consulting you first. No, it's all right. My sister must have lost her mind. Leaving him behind is just the lowest. Tommy, feel free to stay here from now on. We'll take good care of you. Uncle David, that's right. You don't have to worry about anything. I've loved you since you were a kid. Thank you, Aunt Sally. I absolutely detest my sister-in-law and her husband. They're terribly malicious and the worst kind of people. However, I've always liked Tommy. Despite suffering from his illness, he's overflowing with empathy for others, and above all, he's very smart. I don't think he's been able to attend special education school much, but he was naturally bright to begin with. I've always thought that he was the definition of a smart kid. I heard my sister-in-law and her husband left for Hawaii after that. I was shocked that they really intended to go to Hawaii, leaving behind their bedridden son. I wonder what they would do if something happened to him. They wouldn't be able to come back right away. My husband was equally astounded. Seriously, my sister and her husband must be out of their minds. Going to Hawaii and leaving Tommy behind? I agree. I might be out of place saying this since I've never taken care of him, but to leave him without making use of any care services or facilities? If that message hadn't come, Tommy would have been left behind without us even noticing. Gives me the chills. Yes, it's really horrible. Indeed, I've never cared for a child with a serious illness. My in-laws are still very much alive and well, and they've always said that if they ever become unable to move, they'll go to a senior home, so I've never been a caregiver either. That's why I didn't feel in a position to criticize my sister-in-law, but I still can't fathom how she could just leave her son with only a drink and abandon him. The child has a serious illness, so they can receive welfare support, and if they need to travel far, they can also use short-term care facilities. My sister-in-law and her family returned home. They came all the way to our home just to insult us. Here, this is a souvenir. It's perfect for you guys. What's this? They're seashells we picked up at the beach. We have plenty, so we're giving some to you. We don't want them. Oh, really? You're rejecting my kindness. Would you prefer this driftwood then? We don't want any of them. By the way, is Tommy doing okay? Not that I care about such a useless child. That's cruel. How could you say such a thing about your own son? What? What do you know? It's just the worst, having given birth to him only to find out he has a severe illness. I want the money I spent on raising him back. You can only say that because you don't understand how I feel, having lived for such a useless son. Oh, really? So, about what you said before, about leaving him to us, you're fine with us adopting him then? Do whatever you want. Who in their right mind would adopt a child like that? Are you out of your mind? It's not crazy. I'm serious. With that, I closed the door. My sister-in-law and her husband left after that. My husband and I decided to adopt Tommy as our own. And so, Tommy became our child. He had been shocked by being abandoned by his biological parents, but gradually he began to smile in our home. He is bedridden, but he can use his hands, so he freely used tablets and smartphones while lying down. One day, Tommy seemed very happy. Look, my work is going to be published in a literary magazine. What? A literary magazine? I've been writing novels as a hobby. Because I'm bedridden, it's the only thing I can do. It's a little embarrassing hobby, though. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's a great hobby. Can I take a look? Yeah, this is the first one I wrote. I decided to read the short story that Tommy said he had written. It was very well done. It really hit home. This is amazing. I can't believe how good it is. I can't really describe my feelings in words. I just tried writing it on my tablet and it was surprisingly well received. So then I wrote a medium-length story. And this one too. This one got published in the magazine. I see. I had no idea you had such a talent. I showed it to my husband as well. He, being an avid reader, was utterly impressed. This is amazing. It feels like pure literature. Yeah, I admire Fitzgerald and Hemingway. I also like Dostoevsky and Hesse. So that's why you wrapped it up like this. It gives off a somewhat melancholic feeling. The authors you mentioned, their works are indeed sorrowful or rather tragic. Thanks. That's what I aim for. Thus, Tommy's novel was set to be published in hardcover. He chose to use a pseudonym as an author, Scott Wheel. He took Scott from F. Scott Fitzgerald and Wheel from Hermann Hesse's Beneath the Wheel. Soon, author Scott Wheel's book became a smash hit. It seemed to be selling out rapidly at bookstores. There was even a dedicated section for his books at the local bookstore, which made me happy. Then, Tommy won the Pulitzer Prize. We were all surprised. I won the Pulitzer Prize? That's amazing. You really did work hard for this. Oh, Tommy's wonderful talent has been recognized by the world. There's nothing more joyful. Yes, even someone bedridden like me can become a recognized writer. No one should ever give up on their dreams. I need to take a page out of your book. Then a press conference was arranged. Of course, without us. Tommy couldn't go on stage. He needed to be seated in a special wheelchair. His upper body needed to be secured. I wheeled him into the venue. Tommy seemed tense, his facial expression showing nervousness. Finally, the press conference began. Tommy was in front of many flashing cameras. The live television broadcast began as well. I, Scott Wheel, am a bedridden author. Since childhood, I've suffered from a serious illness and spent most of my time in bed. However, reading books was my escape. So I decided that I too wanted to be an author and bring everyone some inspiration. I'm grateful to everyone who read my books and to my step-parents who adopted me. After Tommy's speech, the journalists started asking questions. Some were rather insensitive. They probed about why he was adopted. To this, Tommy responded, "My real mother was very troubled due to my illness. She probably grew to dislike me. I can't blame her for it. Then voices rose from everywhere. What a terrible parent. That's really low. However, Tommy did not seem to want any pity. Everyone has their circumstances, so I'd ask you to not judge them here. Please, I beg you. When everything ended, my husband and I helped Tommy get into the car. Our car was modified so that Tommy's wheelchair could easily get in. Upon returning home, my sister-in-law and her husband were waiting for us. Tommy, you won the Pulitzer Prize? I'm so happy. Come live with us again. My sister-in-law suddenly changed her attitude. She probably thought that Tommy was going to make a lot of money. No, I'll keep living here. I'm not going back to that house. But I'm your real mother. My only parents are Sally and David. Then give us the prize money. No, this money's for my mom and dad, not you. It's for Sally. What? I'm the one who raised you all these years. Give it to me. No way. Despite her not being short on money, my sister-in-law has a keen nose for it. She's the type to latch onto anything that could quickly turn into cash. That's why she insisted on having the $15,000 from the Pulitzer Prize. But Tommy wasn't giving up either. I no longer think of you as parents. Even when I was young, you insulted me. I didn't speak ill of you at the press conference, but you often said things like you wish you hadn't given birth to me. You even said you wanted to abandon such a worthless son, didn't you? Do you have any idea how much that hurt? I'm the one who's at a loss for having given birth to someone like you. You should be the one apologizing. I did nothing wrong. How dare you forget the favor of raising you? Her husband also kept demanding for the money. It made me wonder how greedy they could be. It's shameful. Really vulgar. They flated their status as full-time employees and how they weren't short on money, yet they seemed foolish. So I decided to counterattack. You love money so much you're selling all kinds of stuff on those online marketplaces, aren't you? You're that desperate to make a profit? What? Look, you're selling a bunch of seashells, right? And it seems like you're also selling coral. You think that's okay? Huh? Everyone buys seashells to decorate their homes. No, that's not okay. Maybe taking a few seashells as a souvenir from a beach in Hawaii is okay, but certainly not coral. Even if you say it's not okay, they're beautiful and they're not alive, so what's the problem? It's not about that. Both seashells and coral are important in forming the beach. Even if the coral is dead, it's not okay to take them home. It's even written on Hawaii's official website. Maybe check out the fishing regulations of Hawaii. It'll show you it's not okay. And seems you might even have to pay a fine if it's deemed malicious. What? No way, I absolutely refuse. Well, since you're selling them on the online marketplaces, it's definitely malicious. So I'm going to report you. We're going inside the house now. Bye. No, don't. I totally will. You'll definitely get caught. I can't wait. And with that, we swiftly went inside our house. Immediately after, we contacted the police. Anyone might pick up a few seashells, but I saw it on the online marketplace. My sister-in-law was selling a huge amount of seashells and coral, and it was a ridiculously large amount. I thought she was a poacher or something. She might have thought it was okay to take coral as long as it wasn't alive, but ignorance can be scary. Of course, I also reported her on the online marketplace. Well, I realized the situation just yesterday, so I think it served as a perfect payback. Ever since then, my sister-in-law got involved with the police and ended up paying fines. I hope she realizes the gravity of her actions. She has done something so serious that she should reflect on her actions. Since then, my sister-in-law has stopped coming to our house. I wonder if she's scared that I might do something again. As far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't do anything unpleasant to her, unless she does something to me. But I don't want to deal with my sister-in-law, so I'm thankful she's keeping her distance. I wish she would keep it this way forever. I, on the other hand, am taking care of Tommy while working from home. I'm also getting help from a caregiver, so I don't have to do everything on my own. Indeed, it's tough to care for him as he's bedridden, but I'm happy just to be able to be with him. I want Tommy to keep writing novels worry-free from now on. I hope that his novels will become even more well-known all over the world. Our kids have also become huge fans of Tommy's novels. They'll be coming back home soon, and I hope we can all spend a good time together as a family.